So welcome back, everybody. Today's episode, we are going to be demystifying the art of flowers, their wisdom, and their remarkable healing energies. Now, I know some of you are going like flowers. Yeah, really? Yes, really. Now, flowers are one of those beautiful plants or aspects of a plant that have contributed so much to our lives that we take for granted, people. And, we know that they have been used to inspire us, whether it's through art or, accessorizing our homes, aromatizing our homes, the fashion industry. We know about the floral prints. We take all these things for granted, people, and they are constantly doing stuff and contributing to our day-to-day life. They also used to soothe us. You brag about those beautiful herbal baths where you throw in petals of roses in the bath. You make all these beautiful tinctures, relaxation teas, like the chamomile teas. All these things, our day-to-day lives are infused with flowers. And so this is why today's topic is so fascinating. And we have an amazing guest who has put her life and her work and sweat and tears into discovering and sharing with us the wisdom and the art and the healing properties of flowers. So joining us today to demystify the remarkable art of flowers is our smart guest, Dina. Welcome, Dina. How are you?
Oh, I am so well, Faith, and thank you so much. And I love the way you've already peppered the pot with all of the beautifulness of flowers.
Yeah, because I know people might just think like, oh, it's just flowers. No. Flowers are in almost everything we do. Name one wedding or event you've ever gone to where there are no flowers. You need it for special events. Why flowers? Why?
And like you just said, like look around your home, like everything I look at, the patterns in my phone case, my the cabinet behind me, there's always flowers, right? So why is this? I mean, that's what we're talking about today, right?
Yeah. And you, Dina, are one of the few people who have actually come across who has decided to specialize in the healing energy of flowers and studying the arts. Because, most people study herbology, they study plants, they study the whole plethora, but yours is specific flowers. So this is quite interesting. Can you share with us your journey and what led you to specialize and pick out this beautiful part of a plant known as the flower?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I'm just going to say out loud that we're sort of starting this over because we had an echo the first time we were talking. So that really makes me feel like what was being said isn't how we needed to say it. So we get a chance to start over. So thank you so much for having me. And I guess I want to begin by talking about flowers in terms of the energies of nature. This has been my life's work. And I guess that I didn't even know that in the beginning, right? It's sort of like flowers chose me. And I've always been an incredibly sensitive person from the time I was very, very small. I always felt like that I had this connection to nature, probably through my grandmother. I grew up, she took care of me a lot. And I grew up pretty much in the suburbs of New Jersey in America, where it's not, I mean, it's called the Garden State. And so, yes, there is a lot of beauty, but where I grew up, it wasn't very beautiful. It was a city. And we would sit in her backyard and she would show me the praying mantis, right? This beautiful insect. And she would look at it. She would feed the pigeons and treat them like they were her friends. And so this really shaped my view of the world. And so even so much as like seeing a dandelion, right, which is considered a weed. And I love weeds. Weeds are some of the most powerful flowers there are because they pop up through cracks in the cement, right? And there's no gardener. Like the gardener are the birds. The gardeners are the squirrels, right? Those are the gardeners of the weeds. And they hold the most powerful medicine. And so medicine, like when we think of herbal medicine, right, that we use just about every flower you can think of in herbal medicine. And They relate to our liver, our heart, our digestive system, our brains. I mean, they nourish us in pretty much every way. And so I'm an herbalist from way back. I love herbal medicine.
Mm.
But then when I was about 19, I stumbled into a metaphysical bookshop in Greenwich Village, New York. And I found the book by Dr. Edward Bach, who's a British physician, called Heal Thyself. And it's about his system of using 38 distinct flowers to treat 38 specific human emotional conditions. And he was a physician in the 30s in London, England. He was also a homeopath. And he started leaning more to the side of the quantum energy of the plants rather than looking at physical symptoms to try to cure his patients. And what he discovered was that, in the 30s were such a pivotal time, I feel like, in healing, right? We had all these great visionaries like Carl Jung, who used to talk about, this was the time, the 30s, when he was talking about psychospirituality and the way we connect with our soul. Oh my gosh, the soul, which is like an invisible force that can't be proven, that can't be seen or touched. But most of us know that it's there. And so Edward Bach, he was a physician, and so he was looking at the soul of the plants, the soul of the flowers, and the way we as humans connect in this soul way. And so when he started talking to people about their emotions, wow, everything started to change. And now, nearly 100 years later, like, I feel like we all take this for granted. Oh, we know that healing starts in our minds, right? We know that. But there were these pioneers that sort of had to unearth that and kind of bring it to the fore, through writing and through trials and tribulations. And so even before Edward Bach, I like to look at I believe that the first European person to look at the energy of flowers as healing was this German nun, Hildegard of Bingen, right? I don't know. Have you ever heard of her?
Hildegard of what?
Bingen. Yeah, she was,
Bingen.
Hildegard of Bingen wrote this book.
Oh,
Okay, this is on natural philosophy and medicine. Okay, I'm going to tell you now, the year was 1100. 1100, okay? Yeah, she scribed everything by hand. And the fact that we haven't even heard of her, okay, this is a huger conversation about really, what I feel is like a sexism, right? That we don't hear about this. So in 1100, she scribed all these things. She was locked away in a nunnery, which back in those times was like the best place you could probably be as a spiritualist, because it wasn't so much about what we know now as the prescribed conditioning of what we think of as God and religion. It was more like these people, these nuns and Thomas of Aquinas, right? Like, they were in these places where they were locked away, and they had time. So they had time to communicate with nature. Really, that's what they were doing. And so Hildegard was connecting with nature. She is the first European person to write the texts on herbalism. So her books are out there now. I mean, she hand wrote them, but they've since been, produced and printed, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we can read now, and a lot of her stuff about herbalism is still being used today. But what she did is she would scrape the dew off of the petals, and she would use it as energy medicine. And so Dr. Bach heard of her, like thousands of years later. He was doing the same thing. He was scraping the dew off of the petals, and he was using it as medicine for himself first before he gave it to his patients. And he recognized, oh, this works, but it's really labor intensive to collect the dew on petals, right? So what he began to do was he used more of sort of an herbal extractive method, where he took the fresh blooms of petals, he soaked them in bowls of spring water, and used the sun as the catalyst, the energy, to extract the energy of the flowers. And he would leave that bowl of water out in the sun for about 3 to 4 hours, take the flowers out, and then what he had was a bowl of energized water. Again, we have books now that actually prove that water holds the imprint of whatever you put into it. Okay.
Yeah, and our
So
body is one of the best examples of that. We are water and we hold
we're
energy
water.
and the imprint. Yeah.
Yeah. So as a scientist, he really understood this really, really well. And what
Mhm.
made it seem crazy to his colleagues, he was developing this system that now is just like we all understand it. And so this is almost 100 years later. There are, I think it's like the count last I looked was like over 400 people who produce what we call flower essences, and they're not essential oils. They don't smell. We don't drop them in water. What we do is we take them internally, like we would herbal tinctures, but they only hold the quantum energy of the plant. So in the UK, they're considered homeopathic medicines, right? In America, of course, it's kind of it's I don't want to say it's not believed in, because those of us who do know the truth and do believe in it, we have a lot to offer people, but medically it's not believed in. Scientifically it can't really be proven, although that's changing, because now as quantum physics, gains popularity and understanding scientifically, we can. I mean, there's a book, The Energy of Water, I believe it's called, by, I wish I could, I'm so sorry that I can't remember his name, but he's a Japanese man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We know him.
Yeah. And he has this book where he actually took pictures of the water that was
Yeah.
energized. And
Mhm.
one practice, one exercise that he did was to take a bowl of water and to speak to it lovingly, and then to take a bowl of water and to kind of yell at it, berate it. And then he took pictures of the water, and the water that was spoken to lovingly has these beautiful crystalline
Yeah.
formations. And then the bowl that was yelled at, looks ugly and awful. So, I mean, there are ways we can prove it. There are ways we can prove it, but beyond the scientific ways and the ways that like we need to prove it to ourselves, one of the ways that I've discovered that using the energy of flowers actually works is I have a practice. And so I became a holistic health coach about a decade ago. And
Mhm.
one of the things that I began doing with my coaching clients was I began offering them flower essence, Bach flower essence remedies. When I could hear that their emotions were stuck, I would say, along with the coaching that we're doing, can I offer you a tincture to take? And nobody said no. Everybody wants flowers, and everybody's like, that sounds great. Even if I don't care, even if I don't understand how it works, yeah, I'll take it. And then I would meet with my clients 2 or 3 weeks later. And what I noticed, because I would talk to my other coaching colleagues, was that my clients that I was giving the tinctures to were healing at a quicker rate than those people who weren't using flower energy. So it's just that simple to me. And, whether or not it matters if the person believes in it, that's a whole other conversation. But what I've done in over the course of 30 years now is I've given flower essence remedies to animals. I've given them to babies. And guess what? It helps them to transform. So I'm sold on it, and I don't really need proof. I just know that it works. And then again, this is this bigger conversation about how nature is the one divine source that nourishes every living being on the planet. And that's just a fact. There's there's nothing woo woo about that. I mean,
Mhm.
food, air, water, it's all nature. It's all nature. So the more we can lean into that and really rest in that, the more we can heal ourselves on an emotional level. And then the physical follows.
Yeah. And Dina, how were you able to interpret the wisdom of the
Hmm.
flowers in the context of emotional healing? How were you able to do this?
What do you mean? Like, how was I able
To
to?
interpret the wisdom. So
Mhm.
different flowers. So
Yeah.
a rose, for example, does something
Mm.
very different. It carries a different history, a different energy signature.
Yeah.
And that's why different flowers are also used for different things, for love,
Exactly.
for healing, right?
Right.
So, but
Right.
how are you able to interpret the wisdom of these flowers in emotional healing? Because I'm not the expert on flowers. That's
Mhm.
why I'm asking this question, right? But
Right.
I'm just imagining that the energy and the wisdom in a rose petal will do something very different from a flower of a hortensia, for example,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, or I don't want to use chamomile, because
Oh,
everyone
yes,
knows what
yeah.
that does, but you know what I mean. How were
I
you
know what
able
you
to
mean.
distinguish that
Right.
this is a rose petal, it has
Exactly.
wisdom
Yes.
and energy, yeah, and this
So
specific healing, yeah.
right. So I didn't have to start from scratch. So that's the good thing, is that it wasn't like I went out and I was like, well, this flower means this. So that's why I began by following Dr. Bach's system, because he was the first person to actually put it into a really simple system. I mean, he took 38 flowers, he put them into 7 different categories. And like, for instance, the first category he discovered was fear. So fear, who can't relate to fear? We've all experienced fear. But so then what's interesting to me is there's 5 different flowers that he deemed that could help us to manage fear. Fear shows up in different ways. Sometimes it's fear for my loved ones. Sometimes it's fear of spiders. Sometimes it's fear of not being good enough. There's all these different ways fear shows up. So he was really a brilliant psychologist in that way. And okay, so I began by using those 38 flowers. And then when I got really good at using his system, I began to work with what I call the California flowers. So there's 2 people, Patricia Kaminsky and Richard Katz, who live in Northern California, which is where I live. And they've been doing it since the 70s. They developed, now they have over 100, maybe even 200 flowers that they use that all grow naturally in North America. And so how did we all discover? How did Bach, how did Richard, how did Patricia, how do I look at flowers and discover what they're for? So as botanists, because that's what we are first and foremost, when we're connecting with the energy of flowers, we're really looking at it botanically, right? So
Yeah.
just like herbalists do, when I look at a rose, what do I see? Well, I see the colors. I see the fragrance, right?
Yeah.
And I look at it in that way so that then it makes more sense to me. And so, like I said, luckily I didn't have to start out, or I didn't even want to start out by going to each flower and saying, hey, tell me what you're used for. I began by using systems that were already in place. But when
Yeah.
I teach people about working with the energy of flowers, because I believe you don't have to take the tinctures to heal from them. You could go out in nature, you could sit under a tree, you could be with a rock, and you could you could welcome in whatever the energy is that you feel, and it's going to feel good. But more specifically, like when we're working with specific emotions that we want to transform, then we could look at the specific physical attributes of the flower. And this is what these people did to sort of, discover what they're for. Like when I've gone to classes at the Flower Essence Society in Northern California, they talk about the different flowers that are formed in the shape of cups, right? So like
Oh, wow.
tulips and like trumpet vines, they hold energy in different ways. So they're more receptive. We find ourselves being more receptive in their energies. And then there's flowers that have petals that go outward. And so these are the flowers that usually help us to connect with outward energies or with other people, like calendula does that. It helps us to communicate better with other people. So it's just that, I mean, I don't want to say it's that simple. It's complicated. But when you break it down, it also is very simple and systematic.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. Like, I mean, to all our listeners, Dina's giving you some good gems there.
Yeah.
When you're
And then
out in nature.
exactly. And when you're out in nature, and so when I teach people, how do you connect with the energy of flowers? It gets complicated if I start to throw out names of flowers and this is what it's used for. Sure, that's great. And it sort of has an astrological, an astrological bent where you can kind of connect the energy of the flower to what it means, just like you can connect what Scorpio or what Virgo means, right? We all kind of understand that now, right? That began in ancient Mesopotamia, astrology. And I like to say, even though not everybody believes in astrology, we all kind of understand it. We know that the positioning of the stars hold a certain energy that is ancient. So the same goes for flowers. The same goes for animals. I wrote a book about animal energy, and I wasn't necessarily an expert on like, what does it mean, shamanistically to connect with a bat or a cat or a bird? But what I did was I softened my gaze and I started looking at birds specifically, like, okay, they have wings, they travel into the ethers. So that means that when we connect with bird energy, we're connecting with a higher energy that's already a part of us, right? So I always break it down by looking at the energies of nature. When I teach people how to work with flower energy, sometimes I start off by cutting some flowers from my yard and putting a beautiful bouquet in the center of the room. And I say, I want you all to focus your gaze on one small part of this bouquet. And I want you to sketch it, not because we're great artists and we want to show off how good we see the plant, but more because when you look at the micro level of the essence of the flower, you see it in a different way and you start to see things that become more apparent within yourself. And
Yeah.
in that way, you're touching the medicine. So it's
Mm.
about awareness. It starts with awareness. It all starts with awareness.
I like that point you made. The power of the observer
Yeah.
will give you the answers, you know, just by, you said softening your gaze. And I know what that means because you tend to start to see things more clear when you soften your gaze, not when you're fixated, like I must be already expecting to see something that you read in a book. But when you just focus on
Yeah.
receiving, it's a very different experience.
Yeah. And
You,
I love what you just said about fixating, the word fixating. When I think of like, I'm trying to figure it out, I'm trying to really solve this problem, it's coming from your brain, which our brains are so important. I love my mind, and it has, because I'm not, it's funny, I'm not one of those, spiritualists who's just like, we don't need the mind, we need mind, but it's overused. It really
yeah.
is. And so to bring our capacities of strong, profound intellectualism into balance where it really serves us the best, we have to raise our powers of inner knowing, our intuition, which has really become diluted. Right? Like our culture wants to say that it's woo woo, that it doesn't exist, that because it's invisible, we can't prove it. But how many of us, and I want to say really women particularly, when we trust our inner knowing, when we lean into the feminine force of intuition, which, by the way, is alive in every human being, no matter what gender you ascribe to. It's
Yeah.
part of it. It is part of what we call a feminine knowing intuition, just like our masculine power is our intellect. And when it's at its highest, when we can use our intellect and our intuition in a balanced way, that's when we are acting from our empowerment of wholeness of being. And again, it doesn't matter what gender you ascribe to, it's alive in all of us. And I just like to call it masculine or feminine because we understand that language as human beings, right? We understand that
Yeah,
the
it's bigger
feminine,
than gender.
yeah,
Yeah.
that the feminine is indrawing, is it takes in and really does work on this, like we're saying, this intuitive level, and the masculine is outputting and dynamic in this way where it helps us to achieve what we want to achieve. And so I want to balance both of those forces within myself and help everyone to balance that. And so yeah, nature is such a beautiful thing to look at when we're balancing ourselves in this way.
Yeah, you mentioned something that I want us to go back to because I think it
Yeah.
was very profound. You talked about the connection between color and flowers. And I
Right.
was like, oh, I want us to go through this because
Yes.
we know how, well, I like sometimes, we know how what we wear in terms of color impacts our
Yeah.
mood and our well-being, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
As well. So can you talk about the relationship? I know you touched on it, but just a little bit deeper to dissect the relationship between
Right.
color and the energy in flowers, maybe
Yes.
relative to the mood, the well-being, and healing.
Yes. Thank you. So, I mean, I'm not a color therapist. I know that there are people who work with the energy of color. And again, color is something that naturally occurs, right? That I mean, we've discovered ways to extract dyes and create color, but
Yeah.
look around us. The broad spectrum of life is everywhere. And so I guess one of the ways that I look at color is in terms of the chakra system, because again, this is ancient Vedic Hindu philosophy that looks at chakras. So the word chakra means spinning wheel. And what that means is that there are energy centers. There are thousands of energy centers all around us, but in our bodies, right? And so this goes back to quantum theory, that when we're looking at the quantum energy, our own energy centers can relate to all of the energies around us. It's actually one big blob of energy, that we're not separate from the tree or even the desk. And the desk is made of wood. So that is actual, physical energy. So it's all connected. So color, when I look at like the colors of the chakras, so in ancient Vedic wisdom has deemed that there's 7 specific chakras in our vertical axis that we can attune to create, more power within ourselves. So let's look at the wild rose, for example, since you brought up rose. So that is one of the flowers in the Bach system, is wild rose. And it's a pinkish, like it has like a pinkish hue, right? So when I look at the color pink, when I think of it in terms of pink or red, which is like it's a diluted version of red. And when I think of the root chakra, which is our first chakra, it's the color red. It's determined by the color red. And that is the place within ourselves, the invisible space that governs our sense of safety, our sense of foundational well-being. So when we look at a rose, I mean, even without knowing what Bach used wild rose for, we can guess, right? A rose. It makes us feel so safe. It makes us feel so secure. When I look at a rose, when I smell a rose, I am so connected with the beauty of life. I mean, I argue that rose is the most popular flower, that it's, definitely the most poetically looked at. Like, there's poems written about rose, and when we smell it, we feel enlivened. So Bach discovered that wild rose is used when we feel disconnected from life. So it's a form of depression where we're completely not engaged. And when I meet with somebody and their voice is sort of monotone, like it's just like they're talking like this and they're saying, well, what's the use? They are completely disconnected from life. And, I ask them a lot of questions and I dig deeper, but I often prescribe them wild rose. And what happens is this energy, this pink, this red color, it reconnects them with their vibrancy of life. So that's just one example of how the color red and the color rose is connected. Yeah. I mean, I can go on and on. When we think of yellow, I think of the solar plexus, which is right about here, and that connects us to our sense of willpower. When I think of the color yellow, I mean, the first thing I think of is the energy of the sun, this
Yeah,
bright,
the sun.
luminous energy, right? And so the energy of the sun connects us to our divine force of will and willpower. And it enlivens us, it enervates us, it energizes, it activates this energy of our solar plexus, which then leads us to confidence, to feeling, and so we could point to like what flower, larch. Larch is, well, that's kind of a red flower. So that, but like I'm thinking of like a yellow
A
flower.
sunflower.
Sunflower. Thank you so much. Sunflower,
Yeah.
which is like,
Yeah.
so that's one of the California flowers, which is actually connected to the divine spiritual essence of the Father, and how a good father is supposed to instill us with confidence, right? Like that's what the job. And that's, that's gotten really kind of, diluted through time for many reasons, that's a huger conversation. But the sunflower, yeah. So when we look at the yellow quality of the sunflower, we're lit up from the inside. And yeah, we can take the essence, and that really helps us to connect with, like I said, more of the spiritual entity of the good Father that instills us with confidence, with trust in ourselves, and really helps us to go out in the world and achieve that which we're called to achieve. And, I can even touch on really lightly how I feel like, you know, religion as we know it today has sort of usurped that energy of the good father and wants to talk about God. And when I think of like God and godliness, I think of nature. I think of this one universal force that we're all connected with. And it really doesn't matter what religion we ascribe to. It's there. It's there already in the form of, say, the sun or nature or however we connect with it in that way.
Yeah. And you're saying so many fascinating
I
things. And
know.
as you were talking about the connection between the colors and the flowers and the essence, I was thinking about just how profound flowers are and how strong they're seen as these fragile little petals in
Right.
our hands, but actually they're quite strong.
Oh,
They
yes.
have you know what I mean? They're not just simple petal, that withers after, a week or so. Even the wither, I'm just seeing the whole process from what they represent to, the different aspects and form and shapes that it can take. And you've said so many things that are just opening so many doors
Mm.
that lead to the appreciation of this thing known as a flower, if you know what I
Right.
mean.
Absolutely. And yes, there is a lot there to unpack. And it's
Yeah.
funny because in one way, like I said, since I was really young, I've really kind of I've seen the world through this lens from as long as I can remember. And that's why I think it goes back, millennia for me. It really does go back, um, into this ancient source. And so yeah, there's so much to unpack there, and that's why I write, is because I find that if I can write books, if I can write articles, then I can really kind of cram more information in that way than we can, unpack in, say, an hour. And so, yeah, the Art of Flower Therapy is a book that I wrote that really is a
Mhm.
comprehensive guide on how to use the energy of flowers in this way that we're talking about. A book that I'm working on right now that will come out not until 2026, because it takes a long time to get these things edited through publication. It's called Transcending Sexual Trauma Through the Body, Mind, Nature Connection. And so, we've heard a lot recently about how we work with trauma and how we work with our body and our mind, but we don't really talk about how the energy of nature loops into that connection. And so, I was finding that as a trauma coach, it's not enough to just give people practices or to make people aware. I believe everything starts with awareness. So it's like, it's really great that now we've discovered, and there's so many good books written on how the vagal nerve, can be activated to move trauma, or how moving our bodies physically, it's really important to shift our mindset, or even how like the positive mindset, positive affirmations. I've written about that, how that helps us to transform the negativity that lives in our minds. There's another resource out there that really goes beyond any of that, and it's called nature. When I work with people and I ask
I
women,
like
because
the way
as a coach, you
yeah.
have to help people to kind
Mm.
of define what is it that helps you to heal, because for everybody it's going to be different. So whenever I ask people, what is it, what's something that you find that really supports you in your healing, that makes you feel good when you feel bad? Almost 100% of the time people say, they think and they say, when I'm in nature. When I'm in nature. Nature is the number one medicine that we all have, that is so available to us. Like I point out to people, even if you live in a city, and I grew up, in New Jersey. I spent a lot of time in New York. I live in California now because I love having the availability of the natural world around me. But my daughter lives in New York, so I go to visit her. I was just there a few weeks ago. And so I'm in the city and I'm kind of looking for, where's the nature? How can I connect? Well, there were a lot of pigeons, and that reminded me of my grandmother who, showed me, oh, you can connect with pigeons and they're here, and they, you love them and they love you. But what I was noticing is that, I can walk down the street and I'm walking along and everybody walks at this really quick pace in New York.
Oh, yeah.
There's still a butterfly floating in my path. There's still, when I look down, there's a dandelion coming up through the crack in the cement. And even though the natural resources aren't as abundant as I'm used to them here in California, you could pause. You could take like 10 seconds to just pause and look at the energy that's alive inside the bee that's buzzing by, or the flower that's coming up through the crack in the concrete. And I can just pause and I can just remind myself that I am part of this energy that is there, that is alive, without me having to do anything, and without it having to do anything, it exists. So it really is the foundational element that we all have at our disposal.
Yeah, yeah. I think sometimes the challenge can be, moving too fast, where
Yes.
you tend to take a lot of things for granted that you see it, but you don't see it. You're
Mhm.
aware of it, but you're not aware of it, or you don't take
Yeah,
it in its entirety. You know what I mean? Or you just
exactly.
think, oh, it's just a flower, it's just a little dandelion, it's a weed. Also the perception of what you're looking at, the understanding of what is in front of you
Yeah.
might also impact how you relate to it. You have a different perspective. You know what I mean? So you see, oh, the dandelion, oh my God, the roots are, doing amazing things. You're like, oh, but someone else is like, I need to pluck that. you know,
Oh,
the
well,
mind
that's a really good point. So yeah, I
Mhm.
think two things. Well, one thing you just said is pausing. Taking moments to pause is always going to lead you into a deeper sense of awareness, right? Because again, it's like using that micro lens to look at the little things that are around us. And oftentimes that will help us to kind of know where to move next. And I mean, like, I'm a busy person. I have an agenda. I have a life to live. And it's not always, outside flitting around with the butterflies. I mean, I make sure to do those things because it
Yeah.
nourishes me. It feels really good. But I'm busy a lot of the time, and I do use my intellect, and I write books, and I have to, talk to editors and figure out ways to develop, ways to work with my students. So I'm using my intellect a lot. But when I take moments of pause, and they can be very brief, they can be very sporadic. This is really always what's going to help me. But then the other thing you said about like wanting to pluck the weed and get rid of it.
Hmm.
Okay, this is sort of the impetus that I would say most of us have, is to want to get rid of our suffering. And that makes total sense because suffering feels bad. Nobody wants to feel bad. But this is another key point that I've discovered in my own personal healing, that I see time and again with everybody else I work with, is that to honor and to lean into what feels bad is what catalyzes the healing. I think we've all been there, where it's not enough to take something to mask the pain. It might feel good for a little while and it might kind of get you through. Like sometimes, you have to kind of like, my back has to feel better so that I can do the work I need to do. But at the end of the day, if I keep just kind of tamping it down and ignoring it, it shows up in other ways. It comes through through depression, through anxiety. Oh, anxiety. We all take that for granted now, don't we? That we all have anxiety. I mean, children have anxiety now. That wasn't always the case, right? So, I mean, I think that we're trying to do away with our pain too much. We're not giving it enough voice. So, okay, so this new book that I'm working on, aside from using nature as our foundational resource that's going to always hold us, we still have to do the work of transforming our suffering. So I like to use psycho-spiritual practices. Those are inner practices that go into our subconscious layer of being. We can dialogue with our suffering. We can dialogue with our ancestors. We can dialogue with spirit guides. This isn't new. It's called like New Age. It's called woo-woo. But really, this is ancient practice that shamans, that indigenous people have been using for tens of thousands of years. Before the colonizers came and took the land, this was land medicine. This is how human beings kind of worked with being human, because it was always scary to be a human being, that the indigenous cultures had to defend themselves against predators, like real predators. Like there were bears there, there were real predators, and there was famine, there was even aspects of nature that they had to work with. And I think that ancient beings knew that it wasn't enough to fight or try to get rid of, that we had to work with the energies in order to discover what it is to heal. And again, so that word healing isn't the same as what we think of as curing. Like when we go to the doctor, we want a pill, we want a method, we want an operation that's going to cure the disease. And what that means to us now, curing means to get rid of it. But what healing means is to make friends with what's difficult so that we can transform it. There's always going to be another challenge around the corner. There's always going to be another illness, because we're in a human body. So I'm not saying give in to the illness like, oh, it feels bad, I'm just going to lay in bed all day and feel bad. I'm going to find the ways that actually helps it to transform, that actually gives me skills for resilience, so that when the trouble, the trauma, the pain comes up, I know how to work with it in a way that's going to get me to a higher, really a better way of being. Does that make sense? Is that
Yeah,
resonating with you?
it
Yeah.
does, because, you know, what you're describing, what I'm picking up here is you have to understand your body to the best of your capacity so that you can identify the source. Otherwise, you used a word earlier on, which you said looping.
Mm.
Otherwise, you find yourself looping. You said
Yes,
this right at the beginning.
I did.
And so you'll get the healing or the cure or whatever. But then
Mhm.
if you don't know the source of the problem, you'll recreate it. Or maybe you didn't deal with the source. That's what I think you're saying. You have to get to it, get deep into it and find the root of the
Yeah.
cause.
Right. So you're talking about that word awareness again. Like self-awareness is the blade that cuts through all of our illusions. So, I mean, and this is like, we hear kind of the things I'm saying are kind of a little bit of murmurings of like Buddhist philosophy, right? Which I really do ascribe to that, because it's, I mean, we have a brain. We have a brain, so therefore there's always going to be denial. And denial is a protective device that isn't necessarily bad. Again, like we hear all these things, we're like, oh, denial, like that's a bad thing, right? It's not. I mean, I learned to be in states of denial since I was young, so that I could protect myself from the physical
Oh,
harm
I
that
know
I
what
was
you mean.
experiencing.
Yeah, yeah.
And then as I got older, my self-awareness led me to these places where I could see that my behaviors were still perpetuating this denial, right? So, yeah, so it's a lifelong process. Healing is a lifelong process. And, sometimes people don't like to know that you're not ever going to get to a finish line, which to me is okay, because I don't know anybody who lives in a state of perpetual bliss where they never feel bad, right? So it's more to the point of like finding the joy in every aspect of my life. And sometimes, dare I say, I can find the joy in being able to take care of my emotions that feel bad. Like it can feel
Mm.
good at the end of the day that I cared for myself, even though it felt difficult to care for myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I find that shared experiences or stories, I find that people learn well through stories,
Yeah.
or examples from an experience. And I was just wondering if you could describe to us like an experience, maybe in the form of a story, where
Mm.
maybe a particular plant essence or nature, because I know now you're working with both and you have the Art of the Flower book and the nature book that you're writing,
Right.
but how did it, if there was something remarkable in terms of healing that you have experienced in your line of work, something that knocked the socks off your feet.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it knocks the socks off my feet every
I imagine so,
day. I'm like, because I live in this state of awe that really I do. And like I said, that I'm sort of naturally, that was kind of the thing that came in, that I came into this world, like being this awe-inspired being. But, I've also worked at like cultivating it, like I cultivate it every
yeah,
day. So,
yeah.
I mean, like one thing that really, so again, remember I talked about fear and how Bach discovered that there's these 5 flowers that help us to work through fear. And so I had the experience, gosh, this is going back like 10 years now, where my son was a young man and he had traveled to Europe by himself for the first time. And as a mother, I was just scared for his safety. The day he went, I woke up and I felt just super worried about him, and not for any good reason. I mean, just, that we feel worried, and I'm a mother, and that's just how it goes sometimes. So, I woke up and I just felt this sense of worry. And I already had, my husband and I were going to go hiking that day to this place that we really loved to go, called Fort Ord in Central California. And it's this beautiful piece of land that has just all these magnificent wildflowers. And I go there every year. It's sort of like this place I go to connect with the flowers. And so
Wow.
I still we're on the trail and I couldn't stop thinking about my son. And, I'm just like worried, like, is he okay? And there's this time difference there. And, can I call him yet? And we're hiking on the trail and we came across this tree that I know called red chestnut. And it's the Buckeye tree. So it's called Buckeye is the familiar name. But it's horse chestnut. And so white chestnut is the more common one, but there's also a less common version called red chestnut. And it's just that the flowers are red. And it was in full bloom. And it's these beautiful, like the flowers are like, like a foot long, and they have these little tiny clusters and they smell really good. And I came upon it and I saw, oh wait, this is red chestnut. And I remembered what the Bach, what red chestnut is used for. It is used for fear about our loved ones.
Oh my God.
Oh,
talk about synchronicity.
my God. I stopped and I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This is the medicine I need right now. And I stopped and I like sat under this tree for like, I don't know, 20 minutes, a half an hour. And I mean, I guess it was sort of like a prayer. I mean, I didn't take the drops in my mouth, but what I did is I drank in the energy of the flower.
Wow.
And honestly, I felt completely at ease after that. And my husband's like laughing. He like took a picture. He's like, oh, this is so great. And we went on our hike, 2 hours, whatever. And I really stopped thinking about my son. And I didn't even get to talk to him that day. Instead, we spoke the next day and it was fine. And whether or not that's psychosomatic, who cares? I don't care. I don't care if it's like, oh, just in my mind changed. Well, that's pretty magical in and of itself, isn't it? So yeah, that was one such thing that happened for me.
That's a beautiful story. And sometimes I wonder about these synchronicities.
Right.
Are they really synchronicities?
Yeah.
Because they're so fascinating and they happen time and time again until you have to question, is it a synchronicity or did you send out, now I'm going out there, maybe guys to Woogle land, but did you send out a signal that I need this information and I need this message, and then nature responded back to you? You know what I mean?
Well, I think that what you just said is one and the same. And again, going back to Carl Jung, the great philosopher and the father of psychotherapy, he used the word, he wrote volumes about this term, that the word synchronicity, the fact that we know it so well is because he coined it in the psycho-spiritual terms, that's how we know, that's how we use the word synchronicity now, what you just said, is because it's all connected. So again, when we talk about life force energy, when we're talking about quantum physics. It's all connected. So yes, am I connecting with nature? Is it speaking to me? Am I creating the medicine that I need? I would say yes to all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And like, yeah, it is somewhat mysterious. A lot of life is somewhat mysterious, and I'm okay with that. I'm
Yeah.
also okay with the proof being in the pudding, as it were, that I have these experiences and I talk to people who have experiences. And so the experiences become our truth, right?
Yeah, true. Yeah, they do. Because once you've experienced it, it's just like when you talk about something, until people experience it, they may not be believers. You know what I mean? Then
Absolutely.
when they experience it, then
Right.
yeah, it becomes their truth, and then it becomes another person's truth. The more people experience the same thing. You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
I do. I do.
Yeah. Yeah. And what one thing that I've observed in nature, when I'm out in nature and I look at a meadow of flowers, it's
Mm,
almost like they're speaking to each other, because the one who needs shade is giving it shade. The
yes.
one who needs more light is getting light. Sometimes the sunflowers are facing another direction. And, when you
Right.
observe how the meadows are flowers are interacting with each other, no one is pushing and shoving for space. It's more like they are complementing each other. And I was just thinking about all
Yes.
this and how flowers are so, um, for lack of better words, they're so conscious, not only of
Mm,
themselves and what they need, but also what
yes.
other flowers need and what other plants need. I don't know what your thoughts are on this. It just came across when you're talking about
Oh, yeah.
nature and all the stuff you were saying. I remember observing this recently. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. I think plant consciousness or plant intelligence is a philosophy that is, getting more and more play these days because it's true. And like you're saying, like not only are they communicating above soil, they're communicating below ground, right? When we look at like mushrooms, oh my God, there's so much medicine and information in mushrooms. The mycelium that communicates underground. And I mean, it's scientific proof that the way the mycelium moves and communicates and the blackberry, like just you can find blackberry over here on this side of the fence, and then you can also find that same blackberry rhizome a mile away. I mean, it's communicating with everything in its sphere. And then when we think of the pollinators, like all of the flying insects and birds and bats, that they're also communicating with the flowers and the flowers with them, right? Like when we think of night blooming flowers, like how do they know to bloom at night and put off this scent that attracts bats, which only come out at night? I mean, there's this grand interplay that's going on without anybody having to do anything. And it's creating the life force energy by which we all can then continue on. And I think you said in the beginning, we take it for granted. Yeah, we do. Because without it, without the bats, without the birds, without the flowers, there would be no life. And then what would we do? So, but it's my belief that even if the world ended tomorrow and there was no human life on Earth, the weeds would come back. The pollinators would survive. I mean, I really believe this because I believe that they were here before humans were here, and that they will continue on, and that is life force energy, and that's the regenerative quality of the earth that we can always find reciprocity, so that when we soften our gaze and we notice all of nature that's around us, then we want to care for it more. And that might mean tending a garden. That might mean just noticing, putting out a hummingbird feeder because we love the hummingbirds so much. That those are ways that very simply humans care for nature and give to nature. And then it gives back to us.
Yeah. But now, Dina, I was
Yeah.
thinking about something here.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of plants. Because when you were
Mm.
describing the rose, we know
Yeah.
that there are thorns
Oh,
attached to
yeah.
the rose. There are also plants that are parasitic. We see them,
Yes.
taking all the bugs. There's poison ivy. So there's another aspect of plants. It's not all love and light, for lack of better
Mhm.
words. Can you tell us about what is going on with this other aspect? Because with the beauty of the rose comes the
Yeah.
thorns. You know what I mean?
But so
And
I would
there's
say
also
that's
poisonous plants.
yeah,
Yeah.
but that's what we just talked about you have to love the challenge to find the healing. So, I mean, you know what? I have a very large garden. I keep a lot of roses. You know what happens to me a lot of the time when I'm out in the garden and I'm, oh, yeah, I love you so much. And oh, I'm smelling the rose. I lean over, I lean in to smell the rose. What happens? A thorn catches me in the thigh, through my pants, cuts me, hurts. And I say, ouch. And then I'm like, oh, wait, this is a reminder that sometimes we have to lean into the pain to be able to absorb the medicine. And that's a very physical example of it. But I do think that the thorns of the rose protect the rose bush
Mm.
from other predators from eating it. That maybe that's a protective mechanism so that the deer don't get too close. So it's all part of a divine plan. And yeah, even okay, poison oak. Poison oak.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to go near poison oak and get a rash. Although I have to say, knock wood, I don't know if, they say some people aren't allergic to it. I don't know if I'm not allergic to it or if it's just that I have this really good reciprocity with poison oak, but I've brushed up against it. I have not gotten a poison oak rash. But so that is one of the California flowers that they use in the Flower Essence Society. And it relates to poison oak is a very specific energy that relates to a fear of vulnerability through physical touch. So then the essence of the flower, when we take it internally, helps us to kind of, move past the fear, the vulnerability, so that we can welcome physical touch in an intimate way, on an intimate level. So even those flowers that have like toxic principles can be used energetically in the form of flower essence remedies. Remember, because we're only using the most minute quantum essence of the plant. So I wouldn't use poison oak, or they don't use poison oak in herbal medicine. That wouldn't work. But energetically, it works.
Yeah, that's a clue. That's a good clue how to
Yeah.
look at the other side of the messaging and what it's giving you in terms of the keys there. Because stinging nettle is
Mhm.
one of those, if you
Yeah.
know what I mean. But it's a
Yes.
fabulous plant. It does a whole lot of
Exactly.
wonderful things.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And nettles, well, that's a good example for that in herbal medicine, when they boil it, or when they when they soak it in the alcohol, then the nettles actually fall off, right? So we're not ingesting the
Mm.
nettles. Yeah,
Yeah, but
exactly.
there is that aspect of it. But now I would wonder what that would represent, because it's like it's a double-edged sword, but it's either way, it's just giving you like a message. It's just how we are taught
Exactly.
to interpret pain, like, oh, it's a negative thing. Maybe it's just a signal,
Yeah.
you
So nettles is so the Flower Essence Society puts their flowers into research for many, many years before they release them as medicine. And so nettles is one of the ones that's being researched right now. So I'm just going
know.
to ask you, if you were just, because you seem to know a little bit about the nettle plant, if you were just observing the plant itself,
Mhm.
what properties do you notice about the nettle plant?
When I observe it, it depends if it's flowering.
Mhm.
Um, it grows as a bush. It's
Yes.
very close. Like when it grows, it doesn't grow as a single separate plant, standalone. It usually
Yes.
comes together and forms into a bush.
Yes.
Um, the outer part of the nettles usually has most of the stingy, prickly part, but
Mm.
the farther in you go, it kind of softens up, and you get kind of
Yeah.
like the good stuff. So that's what I notice about the nettle.
And the flowers are white, are they not? They're
Yeah,
like
yeah,
little, yeah,
they're
they're
white.
white.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
I mean, just saying what you're saying, when I reflect on it, I think, okay, so the spiritual medicine must have something to do with the stinging, that's external, right? So maybe we sense an externality in our lives. Maybe there's something outside of us that provokes us, that feels stinging. Maybe we're taking on the energy of others too much. And maybe when we go into our inner realm, when we kind of like retreat into the safety, because white is such like a pure, it like resembles purity, the essence of purity, then there's like a purity inside. So maybe it's like not listening so much to what the outer world is telling us, and really going into what we trust within. It's got to be something along those lines, right? So it
Oh,
really is, like I'm saying, it's kind of just
wow.
that basic.
Yeah, that's a very good
Yeah,
example, listeners. I did the test for y'all.
yeah. And it's there.
Just
I'm
to
saying, and
make
so just the reflection, just your
sure.
ability to be able to go out and maybe sit with a nettle plant, maybe even sketch it a little bit to get more information, and to just reflect on that offers you awareness. It offers you wisdom. So it offers you healing on some level, right? It's there.
And we have loads of it over here. Loads of it. It's
Yes.
everywhere. Yeah, loads
Well,
of
and so I'm a believer too, and other flower energeticists talk about this, how
it.
that we look at the plants that grow within our communities, and then we can also see what it is that it offers the community for healing, because different parts of the world have different challenges, like political challenges and spiritual challenges. And yeah.
Mm.
So that's interesting. So maybe
Yeah,
you'll
and
be
that
on the forefront of discovering what your community needs to heal, right?
yeah, and berries, lots of berries, blackberries,
I
gooseberries,
love
all the
berries.
berries. We have loads and loads of them. So that's a good one. That's a good homework tip.
Yeah.
Dina, do you know about, and I know we're slowly going to head off, we have one leg out the door, but I
Mm.
just wanted to ask you, do you know the book, The Healing Properties of Plants? The
By
Secret Properties of Plants,
yeah,
this one.
by Buhner?
I
Who's the,
think
yeah.
so. The one where they tested the plants
Yeah,
energetic.
yeah, 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 yeah. I think that's by Buhner. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean I have all these books in my yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
What
yeah.
do you think about this book? Because it talked about how, when you're talking about the water,
The
and I'm
secret
sorry I
teachings
waited
of
so
God.
long to
Yeah.
ask you this,
That's
but when
okay.
you're talking about, I think Yoshimoto's experiment on water and
Hmm.
energy and how you communicate to it, they did the same experiment with the plants. You
Right.
know, how you speak to them, the negative words, and they were
Yeah.
dying when you spoke negatively to them, or you had a
Uh-huh.
negative energy or
Yeah.
even a negative intent. What do you think of these findings in the book, real
I
quick?
mean, I think that this is that this is like basic plant energy 101. So, okay,
Hmm.
so I grew up in the 70s,
Yeah.
and school was kind of different back then. And so I had a science teacher that God, we must have been in like I don't even know, fifth or sixth grade. And what our science teacher did is he gave us two little plants, two little saplings to bring home with us. And the
Mhm.
homework was to give them both water and sunlight, like put them both on the windowsill, feed them the same amount of water every day. And over the course of 2 weeks, to the one plant, we were supposed to talk really nicely to it. And to the other plant, we were supposed to talk meanly to it. I
Wow.
was like 12, 10, 11 years old. We did this. The plant I spoke nicely to flourished. The one I spoke meanly to died.
Yeah.
This happened to all the kids who actually did the experiment. Some of the kids didn't really do it, but all the kids who came
Yeah.
back and did the homework, that's what happened. I noticed they don't teach this
No,
anymore.
Dina. You know, when you said this is 101, it's not 101. They don't
Mm.
teach this.
Oh
They
yeah.
don't teach this. And people don't know this. They say, oh, my plants always die. But are you always fighting in your home? What kind of energy
Okay,
is in your
I
home?
had another experience just this
Yeah.
past year. So, there was a family home that we had for about a dozen years where I raised my children. And when we bought this house, there was this incredible stand of, you said hortensia. We call it hydrangea, but I know,
Oh, yeah.
hydrangea, hortensia, in Japan, they call it ajisai. I know this
Mhm.
because I've come to love this flower so much. So there was
Me
this
too.
incredible stand on the north side of the house that were these bright blue flowers the size of my head. And I fell in love with this plant. And
Mm.
so over the course of a dozen years, I would sit with this plant every day. I would love it to death. And not for any reason, because I thought it was so beautiful and I just wanted to be with it. And so every year I did the cutbacks myself, and I would cut it back lovingly, and I would harvest the blooms and I would dry them. And I mean, I have like a whole storage room filled with these dried flowers that I love them so much. Okay. So last year we were moving out of the house. We were getting ready to sell it and moving out of the house. And I neglected, this is the first year that I neglected the stand. I mean, I still loved it, but I wasn't there that much. And every time I went there, I was packing up and in a rush, and I just didn't mind it. Okay, the last time I went there, I went outside to go visit with the flowers. And you know what happened this year? They became brown and mottled with spots.
Oh,
For
wow.
12 years, this never was the case. And I was like, and my first thought was, oh, you got some sort of disease. And I was like, no, this is because I didn't love you. And I mean, I know that sounds so bizarre. And so like, yeah, maybe it just got some, disease. But I know in my heart of hearts that what happened was, and I was like, I'm crying. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry I didn't love you. I know the next people will, and so like, I'll cut it back this year and make sure that it's prepared for the next people. I'm going to tell the people, this is a special plant. But really, I mean, there's another example. And so, yeah, so it's like, it's not even that I didn't water it or feed it, because that wasn't the case. This plant didn't need, it was on automatic water. It didn't need plant food. That wasn't the case. It was just simply the love. And so, yeah. So that right there.
Yeah. Oh, Dina, this has been such a beautiful share. You've shared so many wonderful and practical tips. And I mean, you should know, what I find so beautiful with what you've shared, that the solutions are all around us.
Yeah.
And there really isn't an excuse for anyone not to find solutions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To whatever it is, because it's such a broad spectrum. You know what I mean? You've shared so many different avenues, and I like that. And if there's anything we might have missed that you'd like to share, I'd like you to share it, because maybe there's something we didn't touch on that you'd like to share.
Oh, thank you, Faith. I mean, I think that we touched on so much that then hopefully will lead people in the directions that they want to go deeper into based on what inspires them, right? Because everyone's going to pick up on it differently. And so there's no way to touch on all of it, but I hope that it's all food for thought. But I do just want to remind everybody one point, that if you're suffering, if you're struggling, and you don't know where to begin, go outside, open your arms, and look for the facet of nature that calls to you, and then lean into this energy. And I guarantee that it will put you on the path of what you need to heal, where you need to go, whether it's deeper self-awareness, whether it's calling up a friend who will love you, whether it's, getting into therapy or a support group. Nature is always going to lead you in the direction you need to go, because it is the one source that nourishes us in every way. So, yeah.
I agree. There's a lot out there, a lot of answers to be found in nature. So, to all our listeners, thank you for stopping by. This was our smart guest, Dina Saalisi, sharing with us the art of the flower. And she also touched on so many remarkable properties that can be found in nature. And of course, using ourselves as a catalyst, as an observer, our interaction, our energy. I mean, she just poured it all out there. So I hope you will grab the gems. And until next time, goodbye.
Thank you.